So the global south is all the Caribbean, South America, Africa, the Middle East, Asia, and Eastern Europe. And so basically the whole, like 75% of the world's landmass and 75% of the world's population will be the global south and Eastern Europe. So the global south and Eastern Europe, which is basically the entire Caribbeans, South America, the entire Africa, the entire Asia, the entire Arab lands, the Middle East, and Eastern Europe. So if you think about it, it's almost 75% of the world's landmass and 75% of the world's population that will make up the global south and Eastern Europe. And so the systems are intended to be independent from the Western financial led order. In order for the global south to rise up economically, they have to be independent from the IMF, the World Bank, the SWIFT system, the Moody's system, this interchange system. So what that would allow is that it would allow no interference or non-interference when it comes to the Western economic systems infringing on the global South's economic orders, whether it be the global South or Eastern Europe. So the global South economic system that now currently is called BRICS, but eventually even that name will be changed, but to be more neutral when it comes to, even though it's the founding members, the acronyms of the name of BRICS, but eventually it will be like a neutral. Maybe it will replace, instead of BRICS, it will be called the Global South and Eastern Europe Alliance. You know, maybe in the future it will be called the Global South Union, Economical Union, as well as Eastern Europe. Some type of name that's neutral, eventually in the future. But for right now, it's called BRICS. But what it signifies is basically, eventually, when it's all fully developed, it will be the Caribbean and all of South America. It will be the whole of Africa. It will be the whole of Arab lands. It will be the whole of Asian lands and Eastern Europe. So it will be basically 75% of the world's land mass and 75% of the world's population. And eventually, members in Europe will join. I heard France has interest in joining BRICS. Eventually, European members will be allowed to join. Western European members, states, will be allowed to join. But first, the Global South and Eastern Europe has to set their centralized versions of the IMF, the BRIC, the Moody's, the WTO. They will all have to set their centralized versions of a centralized union, economic union. As far as the Global South and Eastern Europe, they're working on setting their blockchain of cyber economic ledgers, and they're setting up their central banks and their central agencies. So they have to set up their own versions of the Western-led systems. Now the Global South had to set up their centralized, independent of Western powers and their Western. And I apologize for the background noise. I have my dog beside me. He's making noise. So if you hear noise or snoring in the background, it's my dog. So I apologize for the background noise. So, as I was saying, BRICS And I might have to change the name of, or it has to be probably called the Global South Union, Economic Union, or the Global South, and neutral. It has to be a neutral name eventually, because the Western powers like to use the name to stigmatize Russia and China. So I don't believe in that the Global South should be stigmatized, by the Western powers, but they're attempting to undermine the Global South, and I despise that. But as far as the Global South in Eastern Europe, we will have to set up our centralized systems, sort of what the West has, but our own version of it. And it might be totally different. Like, if you study my economical theories about equal purchasing power parity when it comes to all nations' currencies having equal purchasing power parity unanimously, that not one country's currency is better than the other one when it comes to purchasing power. They all have equal purchasing power parity. And the crypto or the cyber currencies, account ledgers, you got to look at my other videos on my YouTube channel to understand how I believe that only sovereign nations should issue their own cryptos. As far as sovereign nations' treasury departments, they all have to issue their crypto allowance through their central banks. It shouldn't be individually controlled. Crypto, people shouldn't be able to coin their own cryptos when it comes to, that has to be outlawed because it leads to much criminals and Ponzi schemers. And so it has to be centrally managed through sovereign banks of nations. But it's a perfect way for nations to barter with each other using their own blockchain accounts. So I believe blockchain crypto accounts should be controlled by their sovereign nations' central banks throughout the global south. So along, and then I believe in free commerce with eradicating taxation for everyone, for employees, for businesses, and for governments and banks. I believe we're doing away with taxation for everything when it comes to employees, businesses, governments, and banks. Doing away with taxation for everyone. When I mean by everyone, I truly mean by everyone. Doing away with taxation. You got to look at my other videos on limited taxation, not only for employees, but also for businesses, also for governments, and for banks. Doing away with taxation across the board. I believe in outlawing sanctions, economical sanctions, and outlawing economical tariffs, making it illegal globally. I believe in outlawing tariffs and economical embargoes, making that illegal within the global South and Eastern Europe system. So I believe in as a theologian of economics, I believe we're doing away with tariffs and embargoes, economical embargoes or economical sanctions. So you got to look at my other videos on this channel of YouTube to study what I'm referring to as far as economic theories and these topics that I'm pertaining to and I'm explaining briefly in this particular video. You have to educate yourselves with my other videos pertaining to economic theories because these are my theories. I'm the theologian and architect of these economical theories as far as what I'm initiating and explaining and highlighting. You have to look at the other videos to understand. Because I'm not willing to go in detail in this video because it's just redundant and it's exacerbating. So you will have to do your own research in my other videos to understand how I feel as the architect of my economical theories on my other videos on this particular channel. So the global south, I considered, as far as the Caribbeans, all of South America, all of Africa, all of Asia, all of the Arab lands, and Eastern Europe. And once fully developed, we will have to have a centralized processing systems, sort of like what the Western powers have set up for themselves. The IMF, the World Bank, the SWIFT system, the Moody's system, the Bank of Settlements, things like that, as far as a centralized global South and Eastern Europe economy. And eventually, once it's all established and fully established, the global South and Eastern Europe, once we're fully established, then eventually Western European members, will be allowed to enter the Global South Union and Eastern Europe Union. So when I say the Global South and Eastern Europe, think about it as one economic union, centralized unions, multipolar regions of economic systems. So when I say Global South and Eastern Europe, think of that as one centralized, multipolar economic system. And eventually Western nations would be allowed to join. Once the Global South and Eastern Europe has set up their economic systems, then Western members, Western countries, will be allowed to join if they so desire. But for right now, it has to be the Global South and Eastern Europe. We have to set up our centralized systems, and it's important to mention Eastern Europe because they're part of the Global South economic system union. So when you think of the Global South, when you see a Global South map, it doesn't show Russia, but when it comes to the BRICS and the Global South, Eastern Europe is included in that economic system. So once these systems are centrally set up, as far as the Global South and Eastern Europe having their centralized economic systems, our own central banks, like our own version of IMF, WTO, Bank of Settlements, the SWIFT system, the World Bank, the Moody's system, the interchange systems, the blockchain, sovereign banking systems. So all of that will have to be set up. And there's a lot of states, waiting to become members of the Global South and Eastern Europe Alliance, of this, which is called BRICS for now. But eventually the name would probably just be the Global South and Eastern Europe Alliance. And eventually when Western Europe is allowed to join, it probably would evolve. The name would evolve. Because the name originally is the original members, BRICS, but as more countries join, in other words, it's not going to be just governed by these founding nations, the original members of BRICS. It's not like that. Eventually, the name will change, so to be all inclusive of all members. So I believe it will be called the Global South and Eastern Europe Alliance for now. Eventually, the name has to evolve, because when people think of BRICS, they will think and assume, oh, it's these original members that are controlling the union of BRICS. Originally, it started that way, but as more members are lining up to join, it's not these first members that are controlling or will be controlling the overall organization. It will all be inclusive. So eventually, the name will have to change. That's the way I feel about it. Eventually, the name has to be neutral to allow all nations to feel that they have equal place at the table. And that's how it has to be. All nations will have their equal place at the table. So in order to be all inclusive, the name eventually will have to evolve. Maybe the Global South and Eastern Europe Economical Union Organization. That sounds good as a name. The Global South and Eastern Europe Union Economical Global Organization. That sounds good for now. And eventually, like I said, when we are all set up centrally, our economic systems of the Global South and Eastern Europe Union Economic Organization, that's the name I'm naming it for now. Which is BRICS basically, but when it's fully evolved, I believe that name sounds good. The Global South and Eastern Europe Union Economic Global Organization. So right now, it's considered BRIC. But eventually the name will have to change to be all-inclusive. But it will be considered, the founding fathers will be considered the BRIC members, the original members, which are the founding fathers of this movement, as far as the original members, when they originally formed as BRICS. That will always be known, that the founding movement would be these First Nations that created the movement. So they should be recognized and applauded, the original BRIC members. Because it's a beautiful effort. The BRIC movement is a beautiful, and it will be remembered as the founding members that created this movement, which should never be forgotten. But eventually the name has to be evolved. So maybe the Global South Eastern Europe Union Economical Organization. The Global South Eastern Europe Economical Union Organization. Global organization. So eventually, once this system is set up, Western Europe will be allowed to become members if they feel they want to join. Once the Global South and Eastern Europe has structured their systems, eventually we would allow Western Europe nations to join and become members if they do desire to join the union, economic unions of this multipolar regional systems. But like I said, Global South and Eastern Europe has to create their own centralized systems that are independent from Western Europe in order to decouple. In order to decouple from America's well-reserved hegemonic power of an economic system, in order to decouple the Global South and Eastern Europe, and then eventually, to be independent, we have to decouple from the Western world financial systems. That includes the European Union. For right now, the Global South and Eastern Europe has to independently structure their own economic centralized systems. But like I said, once it's fully developed, the Global South, Eastern Europe Union Economic Global Organization, once that's fully developed, then Western powers will be allowed. Turkey is considered an Arab nation. So if Erdogan wants to join BRICS, I believe he should be allowed to enter. Because Turkey, even though it's a European member at this time, but they're still pertinent in the Arab world. So if Erdogan would like to join BRICS, he should be embraced into BRICS. The Turkmen Empire should be allowed into BRICS, or may I say Turkey. So, but eventually, hopefully sooner than later, even Western Europe will be allowed. Because I heard France had interest in joining BRICS. I heard France had interest, so soon, hopefully sooner than later, Western nations will be allowed to join this global economic movement. Because eventually, right now it's starting as the global South and Eastern Europe economic union, but eventually it would embrace and allow Western nations to join. Because it has to be transformed. And the only way to transform and create this union is to decouple from the American world financial systems. As the world reserve status, America floats the oil and gasoline of the world, and they control economics as a weapon. And they prop themselves up hegemonically because of it. So, and to the day that all members of the United Nations, state members, all countries, they all have to become permanent members of the Security Council. Every nation has to have their equal place at the table. So when the world-based rules are afforded, all nations equally can have their sovereign voting power. So every nation has their equal place as permanent members of the United Nations, and they all have their equal votes. It's not like it exists now that America has the veto power to coin the. America has veto power to make up the world-based rules as they feel fit, and to be the hegemonic world, in unimpugned world hegemonic power. That has to change within the United Nations. You know, America, with the three permanent members, America, Britain, and France, America vetoes the whole world into submission. That has to change. America feels like they're unimpugned as a hegemonic power, and as three permanent members in the United Nations Security Council, America vetoes the world-based rules as they feel fit to impose themselves on the rest of the world. That has to change within the United Nations. So all nations on earth will be permanent members of the United Nations Security Council, whether America likes it or not. All nations on earth will be permanent members of the Security Council. And all sovereign nations will have their equal votes. And not one nation or any group of nations can veto. In other words, it has to be, when it comes to national security interests of protecting all nations against nuclear weapons, that has to be upheld, where all nations having 100% unanimous votes to deal with the threats of nuclear war, to protect humanity from nuclear war. That's real important to me. But as far as the world-based rules, it will be unanimously voted upon by all nations. Any laws that are passed globally, it will be voted upon by all permanent members. And not see, the system that exists now is America has a hegemonic, unimpugned hegemonic power over the rest of the world. Not only when it comes to economics, but when it comes to diplomacy. When it comes to hard power and soft power, America is hovering and hunging over the rest of the world, unimpugned as a world hegemonic power. And America makes the world-based rules. As the three permanent members, America controls the world-based rules with America's veto power. So that has to change. That's dictatorial to the rest of the world. It's undemocratic to the rest of the world. That type of system. So yes, I'm transforming the United Nations to meet the needs of the new world, the emerging worlds. So I'm not only working within the global South and Eastern Europe Economic Union, global organization, but I'm also trying to transform the United Nations to be accountable to the emerging global South and Eastern Europe and eventually Western Europe when it comes to economics. But when it comes to soft power, diplomacy, and even hard power, when it comes to the world-based rules, every nation has their proper place as permanent members of the Security Council. So this type of system that exists now with America hegemonically controlling Britain and France, and America having veto power over the rest of the world, that's dictatorial. That's tyrannical when it comes to the global order of tomorrow. So we have to eradicate this system and reform it within the United Nations. And I'm born in America. I'm not anti-American. I'm for defending America, but I'm trying to evolve America to be better stewards of democracy, to live up to our credo as the Bill of Rights, to really live up to that Bill of Rights when it comes to all nations being equal with unalienable rights. I believe in that. Even when it comes down to humanity, all being equal, we have unalienable rights as human beings throughout the world. So for America to be hegemonic over the rest of the world is undemocratic. It infringes on people's rights, human rights, throughout the rest of the world. See, America, the United Nations were created after World War II, but it has to evolve. It can't stay static like it exists now with these three permanent members, or basically America manipulating Britain and France, and then America controls the rest of the world, including Britain and France. With America being the veto power of the world, that has to stop. It's not fair to Britain, it's not fair to France, and it's not fair to the rest of the nations on earth. So I have to evolve America, whether Washington likes it or not, as far as the United Nations is concerned. So I'm not anti-American. I am really patriotic towards America as far as how I want America to evolve. But I have to transition America into this new world order. So I don't want America to break apart. I want America to stay strong as a union, the same way I want the European Union to stay strong as a union. Uh, but I have to think of the new world order and the emerging world order. So the United Nations is evolving as well as the rest of the world. New economic systems, they're evolving. So you have to look at some of my videos that I did with topics that have to do with economics, the topics that have to do with United Nations, and the evolution of global societies, the emergence of this new world order. So America has to congeal with the rest of the world. America has to know how to get along with the rest of the world. And the way to do it is to allow the United Nations to evolve. Because if America doesn't, the world will move on. You know, the world will move on if America doesn't respect the rest of the world and the rest of the emerging global South and Eastern Europe. If America refuses to evolve and allow all nations on earth to be permanent members, then we will become permanent members whether America likes it or not, as far as all nations on earth to be permanent members of the Security Council. Whether America likes it or not, the world will take its rightful place at the table, and all nations will sit with their place at the table, their rightful place at the table. So whether America likes it or not, America won't be able to veto that movement. America won't be able to stop all nations on earth from being permanent members of the Security Council. Mark my words on that. That will be 100%. That would happen. That all nations, eventually, all nations will sit as permanent members. Whether America likes it or not, it's not up to America to decide. It's not in their preview to decide. It's not in their sovereign borders to decide. All nations will sit down as permanent members of the Security Council. And when the global orders are set, when all the rules of international norms and accords are afforded as international law, all nations will have their equal votes. America won't have the hegemonic world soul super status to veto the rest of the world. That will be outlawed, America. Y'all won't have that power anymore. When all the world-based rules are afforded of all nations as permanent members, making the world-based rules and accords and ushering in international new laws, that will be the right of all nations to have their equal votes as permanent members of the Security Council. So, because right now the assembly is they don't have, they're powerless when it comes to the permanent members. The assembly, the United Nations Assembly is powerless when it comes to the permanent 3 members, or may I say the 5 members, but mainly I'm focusing on the West. America, Britain, and France. Even even Britain and France are captive to America hegemonic, self-arching world soul superpower, unimpugned. Even Britain and France are underneath the enslavement of this American experiment on the global stage. America has been taking advantage of the United Nations unfairly ever since World War II. Ever since the United Nations has been formed after World War II, America has been taking advantage of the United Nations, and is unfair to the rest of the world that America is becoming monopolistic within the United Nations. It's undemocratic for America to abuse the system of the United Nations to keep their hegemonic rule over the rest of the world. That has to be eradicated. America has to move aside and let the rest of the nations on earth represent themselves united as a democratic international community. So America, I refuse for y'all to continue to abuse the United Nations to be a hegemonic world soul undisputed power arching over the rest of the world with impunity. That has to come to an end within the United Nations. The United Nations has to evolve democratically. In America, you have to step aside and let the rest of the nations on earth have their freedoms and liberties. America has to step aside from being the world unimpugned world hegemonic arching power over the rest of the world. That has to be abolished. That monopoly has to be dissolved. And I'm an American citizen, but I'm patriotically believing in democracy on a global stage. So I want America to go Geo in the new world order of the United Nations, to respect every other nation on earth. I want America to respect every other nation on earth and allow every other nation on earth to be equal, just like we expect to be equal as human beings. America has to respect the rest of the world.